Hello, everyone. I'm Zahid from Talks at Innovation Valley. Welcome, all of you, and welcome to the show. Today, we have a very special and amazing guest, Steve Grubbs, who is the founder and CEO of VictoryXR, which is a Metaverse company, and also a partner company with the Meta to build the Metaverse. And also, the VictoryXR is building the Metaversities in the US region, I guess. Rest, the Steve will tell about it. So before we jump to the topic, which is immersive technologies and future of learning, Steve, we really warm welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Zahid. Very happy to be here. I have been looking forward to visiting with you because of the great work you're doing at Innovation Valley. So happy to talk to you and your listeners.
Right. So, Steve, before we jump to the official question list of the podcast, I would love to know your story, your entrepreneurial journey, your entrepreneurial story. I mean, uh, when when you started your entrepreneurial journey and how you then jumped into the metaverse domain. Tell your story, please.
Sure. So real quick, I started life as a politician. I was in the legislature of my local state of Iowa, and I served as chair of the House Education Committee. And I spent a lot of time working on technology issues and trying to figure out how to bring quality education to everybody in our state. And we have an agricultural state, so we have a lot of rural and remote students, and we have those in cities as well. So how do you pull that off? And then I left the legislature and I started my first company, and then I started my second company, and then 2015 rolled around and I put on a virtual reality headset, which was nothing more than my phone in a piece of Google Cardboard. Cool at the time. But I thought, wow, that's amazing. And so I thought, let's see if we can take this technology and turn it into something that's useful for schools and education. Here we are, 7 years later. I've been pushing a very heavy boulder up a very steep hill for a long time, but finally, I feel like that that boulder is getting a little bit lighter, and we're making progress. Back to you, Zahid.
Steve, I can listen you. Would you like to extend the answer?
I didn't hear a second question. Is there more that you would like to know on the first question?
Yeah, I mean, if you're done with the first answer, then I will move to the second question.
Yes.
Okay. So, Steve, when we talk of learning and when we talk on the immersive technology, how do you see the future of learning when we talk on the immersive technologies? You know that immersive technologies are emerging, and day by day the people are becoming curious on it. But there are many people who say that metaverse, I mean, it is just like somebody's playing the game or there is an avatar in the game. And I mean, people want to understand what actually metaverse is and how the learning will look like into the metaverse and how immersive technology will transform the learning.
Yes. Well, let's look at this from three perspectives. First of all, accessibility. I think we all have a goal to provide students around the world quality education and quality learning, no matter their geography. And if you think about it, whether we're talking about the United States or India or Europe, the single greatest determinant of the quality of your education is your geography. And so to the extent that we can remove geography as a limiter to great education, then we will have taken a big step toward accessibility. And that's important for all of us in the entrepreneurial space and the policymaking space. So that's number one. What we are doing helps to solve that geography question by, first of all, we know that learning is growing, remote learning, people learning through Zoom or Google Meet or whatever online tool there is. But through these traditional online methods, students can't learn using their hands. They can't pick up a tool and learn how to learn carpentry. They can't learn welding. They can't learn how to operate a drone through Zoom or this 2D learning. They can't learn how to turn over a patient in the hospital bed or use medical devices. So if we're going to have accessible remote online learning, then it must also be immersive, 3D, and synchronous or multiplayer. So think in terms of, let's leave schools behind and just think in terms of a restaurant. Let's say that you have 5 India, and I'm sure that you have chains that do that, whether it's American chains like Domino's or KFC or some other chain. Now, you have to train all of those students how to use equipment. And you can either train them in 2s and 3s inside a kitchen, or they can start in a kitchen simulator, and a regional trainer from Bangladesh can have students from all over India at all those stores come into a training center in virtual reality in the metaverse, train them on how to actually use the equipment using these simulators that have been built. And then they can take an assessment to see if they learned the information they needed about safety and how to use the equipment. So that's a big deal in the corporate training space. The same thing is being done in the higher education space. So think in terms of cadaver labs. So in the United States, a lot of colleges and schools have cadaver labs where a dead human being is preserved, and medical students and health science students can actually work with a human body. But it's expensive. It's hard to come up with dead bodies. And also, most schools don't have one. In a metaverse cadaver lab, everybody in the world has access to an affordable cadaver lab that students can use to learn about anatomy, biology, and caring for patients. So these are examples of simulations that create greater accessibility. So that's number one. Number two is we have to meet students where they are with hardware. In our opinion, the best experience right now is in a VR headset. But VR headsets are, in some places they're fairly broadly deployed. In the United States, there are a lot of them. But even with that, most students still do not have a VR headset in the United States. And so we also need to make sure that this immersive learning is available on other types of hardware. So we're working on AR glasses with Lenovo and Qualcomm and some other partners. But the most accessible is through a PC or a Chromebook or a MacBook. So I'm coming to you right now on a MacBook. And so that makes a big difference. So if you think about the game Fortnite, 400 million registered users for Fortnite, or you think about the game Call of Duty, those are both 3D worlds that multiplayer students or gamers, many of them can come into the same space and manipulate their environment and interact together. Now, the good news is in our world, people aren't shooting each other, and they don't parachute in from buses, but they can come in via PC to this 3D world, and that makes a big difference. And then the the third and final thing to think about are use cases. So in order for this to take off, you have to find the right use cases. The platforms that are struggling right now, they're very limited in use cases, meaning that they're mostly social environments. Now, VR chat has been very successful, but some other platforms that are similarly situated have been less successful. And those platforms do not have simulators or simulations integrated into them. And so in order for a platform to be successful, it needs to be able to bring simulators into that environment. And that's actually why we built VXR Labs, so that our world of simulators will be available to everybody for free. And then there'll be like it's like Netflix, right? You'll be able to purchase a premium package. It's more like Hulu, I guess, which has the free ad supported, and then you can pay for the premium package without ads. So that's how we'll roll that out. But those use cases really matter. Letting students be hands-on with learning and kinesthetic. So that's where we're going with this for the time being, Zahid.
Right. Steve, that concept of metaverse has been around for decades. But why it is taking off right now, and what's driving it?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Apple Newton, but the Apple Newton was an early iteration, an early version of the iPad. It came out in the 1990s, and it was a major flop. Why? Because sometimes you have to wait for technology to catch up to the idea. So virtual reality has been around for a long time. Simulators have been around for a long time. But it wasn't until recently where, especially with the advance in technology and mobile phones, with all of the different pieces of technology they built into those were then able to be built into headsets to make virtual reality work in a way that actually made it real and made it so that you didn't get sick. And they had a lot of problem with nausea and sickness in the early days of VR. And it's still a smaller problem today. But the bottom line is that it's much better due to technology advances. And so the other big advance, when we first started working with virtual reality in 2016, everything was asynchronous or single player. If you were going to go in, you would have to go in by yourself and learn, and we would put holograms in there, et cetera. But starting in 2019, multiplayer or synchronous virtual reality really took off. And that makes a big difference. The fact that we can all gather together and game together, attend a concert together, learn as a class together, this is a big advance. And so, through the pandemic, we were able to introduce this concept and begin rolling out metaversities. And the concept of the metaversity, a place where learners can remotely gather together and learn just as if they had driven their car to campus. That was a game changer in the United States and now starting in Europe. And I think it'll be a game changer in India as well. So that's why the right time, the right idea, the right technology all came together between 2016 and 2020.
Right. And Steve, when we talk on technology innovation, technology innovation has always been a double-edged sword. What are some of the pros and cons of where this technology is headed?
Sure.
Because many people, when we talk on technology innovation, many people are like, I should not use the word negative. Many people say like, hey, it will negatively impact the learning process and the eyesight and the social interaction. So
Yeah. Well, we've talked about a lot of the benefits, so I won't spend a lot of time there, but I will address a lot of the criticism. So, as you know, Zahid, we have a very active social media presence. And on LinkedIn, people are very positive. On Facebook, people are very negative. There's a lot of positive people on Facebook, but people are not afraid to be negative. And the leading criticism that we hear is, why do we want to trap students in this isolated world where they're not interacting with others? And that's a fallacious or a wrong statement on many levels. First, our company motto is we want students to learn in both worlds. Learn in a simulator 3D world, and then learn in the real world. And the best example of this are airline pilots. In 2009, an American pilot, Captain Sullenberger, took off from LaGuardia Airport in New York. When he took off, a flock of Canadian geese flew into or were sucked into both of his jet engines. Shortly thereafter, he lost power in both engines. The decision he made was to land that jet into the Hudson River in New York. He did it successfully, saved all the lives of the people on that plane. Now, did he learn to do that in real life? No, you can't train a pilot how to land a plane in a river without engines in real life with the weight of people on it. But he did learn it in a simulator. And none of us want to go up on a jet with a pilot who has not successfully passed their simulator training. We also don't want to go up in the air with a pilot who hasn't flown a plane in real life. We want a pilot that has learned in both worlds, the world of simulation and the real world. That's what we're bringing to the table, and that's what the rest of the people in this industry are bringing to the table. The opportunity to learn in a land of simulation how to administer a shot to a patient, how to operate expensive and dangerous equipment on a plant floor. These are the things that we want people to learn first in the metaverse, and then once they've learned it there, move into the real world. It makes sense, it's affordable, and it will reduce the number of accidents and negative outcomes that happen. So that's the first response to that criticism. The second response is that the metaverse, especially metaverse education, is incredibly social. So, for example, Zahid, if we're learning astronomy up in the VictoryXR starship, you and I can go in there, we can meet in the starship, we can learn about astronomy. Even though you're in India and I'm in the United States, we can fist bump. We can break into a small group in the corner of the room and have a discussion. But then you and I can put on our spacesuits and go for a spacewalk and learn astronomy in a bigger way. But it's incredibly social. And it's not isolating. It's the opposite of isolating. So people learn social skills like they would in the real world. And they learn useful skills that they need to learn, that it would be more difficult and more expensive in the real world. So that's the biggest criticism we receive. Some people say, what about cost? And I say, well, in the United States, if you're going to college, most people get accepted to college, then they either move to a new city, rent an apartment, very expensive, and go to college. Or they pay very expensive tuition. It's much less expensive to take courses on our virtual reality campus, where you can do it from your home, but be on campus, a digital twin replica of the actual campus. You can be there with other students, much less expensive. And then third is whether the virtual reality headsets will have a negative impact on eyesight. And at this point, the studies from ophthalmology, from the eye experts, says that once you get past the age of 8, 9, 10, whatever that age is where your eyes are developed, then it's not a problem. And thus far, in 5, 6 years of active virtual reality use, we've not run into this. We've not run into an issue. Now, I've got glasses on, but that's because I'm now needing them because I got over the age of 50. But not due to virtual reality, just due to the natural effects of aging. So virtual reality, immersive metaverse learning, there's certainly challenges that have to be overcome. But on balance, the net benefits far outweigh the negative considerations.
Right. When we talk on the learning in school, college, or university, can you give some examples of, like, can you share some use cases that could help to understand actually that it's really working?
Sure.
The learning in the metaverse is really working.
Sure. Let me give an example of Morehouse College, really the pioneers in this space. Dr. Ovell Hamilton teaches world history, and he teaches the exact same course every semester. Professor Hamilton taught this course in a brick and mortar classroom, a traditional 4-wall classroom. Then he taught the class through Zoom, or like Zoom, 2D through a computer. Finally, he taught that class on his Metaversity classroom. And then at the end of each semester, in all 3 ways that it was taught, students are evaluated. They're evaluated on 3 things. Number 1, class attendance. Number 2, grades. And number 3, student satisfaction with the way the class was delivered. On all 3 of those measurements, class attendance, grades, and student satisfaction, the Metaversity campus was heads and shoulders above the other 2. And why is that? Well, think about learning world history. When he taught about World War II history, it's one thing to read about it in a book. It's another thing to watch it on a video, but it's a far superior way to learn to actually stand on a battleship in the Pacific Ocean and learn about the war in the Pacific. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. When he taught about the impact of the railroad on Africa, well, he was able to teach that on a locomotive, on a train. So we also have a time machine where you can go back in time. For example, in the United States, we had slavery was a very big issue for a lot of years. And so students can get in the time machine and go back to La Amistad slave ship and understand firsthand what a slave ship was like. They can go to the Underground Railroad Museum, or they can stand on Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, where the 1965 civil rights marches began with Martin Luther King. So it's no surprise that students remember more learning in that way. It's the same thing with learning about molecules. Molecules are very small. I've never seen one in person, but in our chemistry lab in virtual reality, I have seen molecules, and I've been able to play with them and manipulate them and break them apart, something that I can't do otherwise. Now, I could do that with like a model. Like in school, they gave us straws and some styrofoam, but I can do it with much more complex models in virtual reality than I can in real life. So that's a big consideration. And those are just some of the use cases that are making a big difference in higher education.
Right. when we see right now, when we see the metaverse, or when people talk about the metaverse or immersive technologies, the one thing that comes into mind is that there is an avatar, or kind of a, like, looks like a cartoon, it's in the screen. So do you think there will be a time when the ditto copy of a person, the digital ditto copy of the person, will be in the metaverse? There will be a time soon.
Yes. So, soon, I don't know how soon, but here's what I know. When I went and saw Toy Story many years ago now, it was amazing. I loved it, but, clearly those characters were not photorealistic. Not even the humans in Toy Story were photorealistic. Today, I watched that same CGI, computer graphics, and it's amazing how sometimes I can't tell if it's real or if it's not real. And so we know that over time, technology will catch up. Right now we're in the Toy Story phase of metaverse education. But in the not too distant future, it'll be much more photorealistic. And there's great progress being made on that already. But remember that most virtual reality headsets are run with a mobile graphics chip. And that chip is the same chip in your phones, or very similar to the chip in your phone that does graphics on your phone. It's not a powerful graphics chip that you would find in a graphics computer. So there's a big difference between those graphics chips. As the chips catch up, the photorealism will become much more sophisticated.
Right. So when we talk the learning in metaverse, do you think the world is ready for learning in the metaverse, especially when we talk on the connectivity, when we talk on the infrastructure around the world, especially developing countries? And also, please, the infrastructure, connectivity, and is not enough. There is a thing we say, innovative mindset. People hate change, many people resist change.
Here's what I would say, Zahid. Um, a lot of people in the United States think Africa is more backward than the United States. Well, far before the United States ever had mobile commerce and widespread use of mobile in everyday business, Africa was ahead of the United States. They leapfrogged technologies to go from old, outdated telecommunications to most people on the continent having mobile devices and learning how to do their banking and other things through mobile. So they leapfrogged the US and other developed countries. So when we think that a country might not have the infrastructure or they might not be ready for it, those are the times when those countries and those communities surprise us. And they show that they are as innovative when given the opportunity as everywhere else in the world. So I take that view first. Second, the world is also a bell curve. You've got the third standard deviation that's already adopted it and they're charging ahead. And you have the second standard deviation that is figuring out how to adopt it now. Then you've got the 67% on the first standard deviation on both sides that have heard of it. They're starting to think about it. And sometime in the next 3 to 5 years, they'll adopt it. But then, of course, on the other end, you've got the second and third standard deviations of the slow adopters, and they will come later. So we don't look at the universe of adoptees and potential customers and clients as one monolithic universe. We understand that you will always have a bell curve on adoption. And as we do, we're going to work with the third and second standard deviations first, and then move to that first standard deviation. Now that might be a little too statistics laden, but I think most people today will understand that bell curve analogy.
Right. When we talk on technology, and when people listen the news about the new technologies, there is a fear factor. Many people, like, say the clean sweep statement, like the technology will replace the human being, AI will replace the teacher, AI will replace this and that. So when we talk on the immersive technologies and technologies in general, do you think that technology will ever be able to replace a teacher, or it's just a fear?
So a couple things here. When I was in school, that was the advent of the calculator. Texas Instruments created these inexpensive calculators, and suddenly, poor eighth graders, ninth graders like me could afford one. But our math teacher said you cannot use that calculator in class. And that made sense. You got to learn how to do math without a calculator. Well, imagine my surprise when a few years later I showed up at school and the students were all using calculators. And I thought, boy, are they going to grow up dumb? But it wasn't the case. Calculators became an important learning tool. And they didn't replace learning math. It certainly shortcutted some pieces of it, but it was integrated into the learning system. It'll be the same with virtual reality. When we introduced computers into schools, it made research quicker and faster and easier, but certainly not, it didn't replace anyone. I see what we're rolling out right now are AI conversational avatars. And these avatars will be able to act as educators. So, for example, if you were to take our welding course, we will upload the entire welding textbook into the brain of our AI avatar. And so if you have a question, you'll be able to say, hey, Mr. Fix-It, how do I do this? And because Mr. Fix-It has it all in his brain, he'll be able to give you the answer to that. Having said that, there will still be a role for humans. And for decades, I hear the same thing that, technology is going to replace humans. Well, in the United States, we still have very low unemployment. And I know it's not as low everywhere in the world, but what we find is that the more you introduce technology into your economy, the more jobs you have for people. And maybe someday we're going to see that, over time, people go from a 40-hour work week to a 20-hour work week because robots and AI is doing the work for us. But I'm very techno optimistic at this point.
Right. So when we talk about the point we are standing today, AI is getting crazy, and some people say is getting, doing wonders. So uh, the learning model and teaching model is very important to discuss. Some people say on campus was the best, some people say online is the best, some people say hybrid and blended model is the best, and now the metaverse is another thing, because that is not just online or on campus, there is, a blend of physical and digital. So when we talk on the learning and teaching model, which model on this point is the best right now and would be the best in the future?
So here's what I believe. I am but a simple human. My brain has very dramatic limits. I don't know that I can figure out what the best model is. I have my opinion, but my opinion is not any better than others who study this, who disagree with me. What I do believe is that the marketplace will ultimately give us more than one answer, and we will adopt those answers. There were those who believed for a long time that a student needed to leave home and go to a boarding school to get the best education. That's no longer necessary. It still happens, but it's no longer necessary. The marketplace has given us other answers. So I think we're going to let the world figure it out. The best solutions will likely prevail. They almost always do.
Right. And when we talk on the learning in the metaverse, age group is something. For what age group learning in the metaverse is best?
Well, like a lot of technologies, those who take to it quickest are middle school, high school, college. So we expect that this will be the same group, that led on social media and led with computers and everything else. So we expect it to start there. Having said that, we think that immersive 3D learning through a PC is important for all ages. I think virtual reality may be more suited to those in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. I enjoy it, but some people my age do not. So there's a solution for everybody, but we expect it to start in college.
Right. Steve, this would be the last question. Not a question, actually, a message, an inspiring message from an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, what would you like to advise to the new entrepreneurs and to the college and university students? Any message that could inspire all of our audience?
Sure. First of all, you live in an age where the opportunity is more democratized than at any point in history. The resources to create something new, to build something global, are at your fingertips. And we see it every single day. Somebody who barely can afford to pay their rent builds $1 billion company in 2 years. Now, I grant you that's the exception rather than the rule. But this is the third company that I have built that is valued greater than $10 million. And, I certainly am not in a class of Elon Musk and many of these other guys, but I started out with nothing and took an idea and I tried it. But you know what else? I didn't marry my ideas because a lot of my ideas have failed. And so I always tried to be able to test an idea at a low enough cost where the impact for failure was not too great, so I could walk away from it. I've made a lot of mistakes and I've failed a lot, but it's okay to fail 5 times if one time, that 6th time, is a $10 million idea or a $100 million idea or $1 billion idea. So don't be afraid to try, but try to make what we call small bets. And the last message I would say is that you must be willing to dedicate yourself to entrepreneurship. It's not an 8-hour-a-day endeavor. And I see this more with students from India than almost anywhere else. If you look at American technology companies, many of the largest companies in the world now are run by people who were born in India. And the level of hard work, the values of dedicating themselves to an idea of success really makes a difference. And so the Entrepreneurship is no place for the lazy. You have to be willing to work hard, and you have to be willing to absorb some losses and not be discouraged. Ultimately, most people I know that stick with it, they succeed at one level or another. Maybe they succeed modestly, maybe they succeed wildly, but they got to stick with it.
All right. So amazing, Steve. Trust me, it was so insightful. And I'm sure that all of our audience will get a lot of insights from this podcast. So thank you so much for joining.
Excellent. I appreciate the time, Zahid, and I look forward to watching your success at Innovation Valley.
Thank you.